Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to Concordia University's Force Space. Thanks for joining us for the third panel in today's Frames of Reference symposium brought to us by the Nostagain Network. Now the third panel, the title is Nostalgia is Where You Make It. Now just to let you know, if you're just joining us now, that we are live streaming this to YouTube and via Zoom. And if you have any comments, questions, or problems, just let us know in the chat. We can read out questions, etc. Those of you here in the space, you probably know. We'll run around with a mic if you've got comments and questions. Okay, very much my pleasure now. Pass things back to our Concordia Public Scholar and host and impresario for today, Richy Srirachanikorn. Back to you.
Hi, welcome back. Hi, welcome back. You're all full now? You've restored your energies, yes? Just as a sort of, energetic, I know symposiums, they demand a lot out of you. Maybe on the count of 3. So on 3, clap, okay? What's your energy level like? If it's low, be honest. If it's really high, all right, over here. 1, 2. 1 clap. Very good, very good. 1 clap. 1, 2. 1, 2. Okay, somewhat. Over here at the back rows, perhaps, back rows. 1, 2, not bad. Over at the desk, fourth space, 1, 2. Oh, over here, folks, all right, I'm counting on you. 1, 2. Oh. And over at the cafe, 1, 2. Oh, gosh. How are your presenters doing? 1, 2. There you go. So welcome back again. The fourth space is so generous to host us every year. This is our 4th year running now. For folks on Zoom and here for the first time, we are the Nostagain Network, the first and largest student-led research group showcasing and studying nostalgia, right? So we're always looking for more members, both professors, both students, artists. We're always expanding what we call nostalgia. The reason I bring this up is because as a supposedly junior nascent nostalgia scholar, I came across this particular submission this year for our research creation hour that starts at 2:30, or actually later at 3-ish. And it's by a person called Elliot. Elliot Stocking over here. Elliot. Elliot is in their BFA, and they're a member of the Technoculture Art and Games Research Center, which studies social issues through games. My introduction to Elliot, however, was not about games. It was about their nostalgia. You can see probably when you walk through the research creation hour, over to your left, top left corner, Elliot has weaved and crocheted a huge map, a top-down map, by memory of their home in Toronto. You can see that their room is larger than their siblings' rooms. You can see that in the architectural blueprint, there are some black spaces, gaps that they couldn't register, right? Is it black space, or is it simply something else that they weren't privy to, couldn't remember? On top of these crochets, which was done by labor of love, by hand, they also carved out wooden figures or tokens. These figures represent sort of keystone objects that represent each room and the stories behind it. A Wii remote, knife and fork, right? Different figurines, a Zelda sword, and you can ask them about it. But something that struck me right away as a nostalgia scholar, and I told Elliot this, is for the first time in my life, I have finally seen what I consider rose-tinted glasses. We always talk about that, right? For the first time, I can hear, feel, see it, communicate it through their layering of this film that I'll be showing, of what it means to see the past through rose-tinted glasses. This is Elliot's piece that will also be accompanying their crochet map over there, but I'll just roll the clip now for you all to take it in. Maybe you can dim the lights if that's possible before we start the panel 3.
You have another next one.
1, 2, ready, go.
Let's start. We're just gonna practice once, okay?
Okay. At 61 hindsight in the weed for the first time.
Yes.
You thankful for?
I'm thankful
No, we need to take a picture. So you can keep dancing.
You are my dad. Now here, your silliest face.
Good. I'm thankful for
Oh no!
Okay, we're ready to sing now. Okay, that was practice. Now we'll sing. I'm thankful for owning our own house and
You did it for our project.
beautiful. Here we go.
I'm trying to zoom in on the third. Shall I guess I am pretty lucky I didn't break one. Okay. Un million de fleurs dans les jardins. What are your favorites? Second thing.
Oh, he's spinning, he's getting dizzy.
Just Panama. And then Daisy. And then
Oh, that's very
You are the best. Stand back. Don't put your hand.
that color on that blue. That's really pretty, but it looked like a monkey.
Don't hit the piano.
Monkey.
I know. What did you say?
A paint that was like this. Oh.
Cast away the old
morning of Jacob's 8th birthday. How's it feel to be 8, Jacob? We're working on this Harry Potter Legos. Happy birthday morning.
Wow, it's indestructible.
Least favorite. No, I don't. My least favorite is milk.
How do you put it together? It's awesome.
Bravo, bravo. Very nice.
There is a chance to talk to Elliot more about this, but I learned that the piano playing was recorded closer to the present, and the home videos were stitched from their past. The piano, the song itself, is a nostalgic thing for me because it's a piece of music that was played in my classroom. It was accompanying an animation of World War II. That's how I learned about it. And none of my friends remember it. I do. That song in my entire cohort is still with me. And those folks out there too. Anyway, we now move on to our third panel to hear about, through home videos, through media, how it is that we sort of excavate, layer, and uncover all these things that we call home memory and nostalgia for where we came from. Pass it over to Dr. Cate Cleo Alexander.
Can we, yeah, there we go. Can we first give it up to Richy for all of these wonderful interludes? Amazing. So my name is Kate. I'm your friendly neighborhood moderator for panel 3. Today we're going to be talking about nostalgia is where you make it. I'm going to let our participants, our people introduce themselves. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Mouna, who is a PhD student over at UCAM.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Perfect. Okay, so hi everyone. I'm very grateful to be here. Before starting, I would like to thank everyone who has organized this symposium and also for allowing me to speak today. Just a small disclaimer, English is not my first language, so I might mispronounce some words. And also my research was in French, so had to be translated to English. So please bear with me, I'll do my best. So I'm here today to present the results of my master thesis, which focused on the transmission of memory in the family homes of young Quebecers of Moroccan descent and their proximity to Moroccan traditions. Today, our main focus will be to look at these results through a nostalgic lens. So I'm happy to present this communication, which is titled, Imagining My Parents' Country, Nostalgia and Memory Within Moroccan Family Homes. Okay, this is just a quick summary of what we'll be seeing today, but I will mainly focus on the results because that's where the truth and the nostalgia lays. So just to give you a little context before going into the research itself. So Morocco has a very big history that dates back to ancient times. For the purpose of this communication, I would just like to emphasize on a few things. So there is a lot of indigenous people on the land of North Africa, which are called the Amisola, and are very present in my research as well. Morocco was colonized, just to name a few, by Spain, Great Britain, French, and the Arabs, and its independence was gained in 1956. Darija is the mother tongue of a vast majority of Moroccans. I say that because there are also other indigenous dialects that are spoken. So Darija, what is very interesting about it is the language itself is not institutionalized or recognized as an official language in Morocco. It only exists as an oral language, so therefore it is not written. It is closer to everyday life expressions and the speakers. It's a mother tongue that is acquired spontaneously through socialization, through family, social relationships, so friends as well. Also, for the purpose of this presentation, just to say, there was a large immigration of Moroccans in Canada, especially in Quebec, because of the French. Because a lot of, like I said earlier, Morocco was colonized by the French, therefore a lot of people did speak French and were qualified to come to Quebec and to immigrate here. Also, just quickly, I'm not going to spend too much time here, but just to let you know that many concepts were used in my research. We can take a look at linguistic relativism, intergenerational transmission, memory, and nostalgia in a diasporic context. We can always come back to it later if you do have questions. So, through different practices based on Darija, again, the oral language, I seek to understand the transmission of Moroccan tradition within family homes, particularly traditional and tacit knowledge. Given the significant Moroccan migration phenomenon in recent years, few studies in Quebec and Canada have explored the transmission of memory and Darija, as well as the cultural proximity to traditional Moroccan knowledge. All of these brought me, after lots of tears, to this research questions here, which is how does the transmission of memory within the family home contribute to building and maintaining cultural proximity to Moroccan traditions among young Quebecers of Moroccan descent in a migratory context? Whew, long question. I had also 3 sub-questions, but just for the purpose of this presentation, I'm just going to put this one here. We can always, like I said, come back to it later because I'd like to get into the nitty-gritty of the presentation. So how was this research conducted? Mainly, I visited 2 family homes. So in those family, I conducted semi-structured interviews with 2 young Quebecers of Moroccan descent, usually a daughter and a son. And I also had group interviews with the whole family, What is interesting is the parents were born in Morocco, but the children were born here in Quebec. And also they were from different ethnicities, so I visited some families that identified more as Amazigh, others more as Moroccan, others more as Arab. They were from different cities of origin in Morocco, and ages and backgrounds. And we went more for an inductive approach through that. So now the question is, where is nostalgia in all of this? So as I was trying to make sense of my data and everything that I analyzed, I felt like there was something missing, something I was not able to put my finger on. And then it kind of just dawned on me, my research was embedded in nostalgia. So this realization was followed by many questions, which I share with you today. So here I go. Can nostalgia be inherited? Why is it transmitted? Does nostalgia live beyond the past and the present? How much of a companion is nostalgia to memory? Or is nostalgia the reason why we choose to pass down memory in the first place? Unfortunately, I do not have the answers to any of those questions, but I do have hope that sharing them today in this space will enable us to think about them collectively. In this hope, I share with you the results of my research as a step forward to a meaningful discussion about nostalgia. So the first thing I'm going to address in my results is Derija. Derija as the product of memory. So for the children I interviewed, Derija really draws on memories and is the primary anchor. So both children and parents use it as a tool of communication, understanding, and connection. So it is really a gateway to Moroccan culture for the children. It also conveys a shared view of Morocco, so parents seem to perceive it as essential for Moroccan identity and traditions. So the results indicate that the language takes a symbolic form, but it also reinforces this imagination and constructed framework of the country of origin. So these results are consistent with the view that Derija is meaningful because it is strongly linked to Morocco's history and particular origins. What I found also very interesting is the link to family stories and tales. So most of the stories and tales that were talked about during the interviews were mainly done through Derija, using Derija. So language allows individuals to link past and present and to build a sense of cultural belonging over time. Also, the results showed a proximity to Moroccan traditions like beauty rituals through ingredients, women, and memory. So a connection to the land through ingredient was very interesting. So the choice to bring back ingredients from Morocco. So that showed a connection to Moroccan nature and the use of these ingredients to have a connection again to the land, to the tradition, to women as well. So that deep connection was seen through Moroccan women, especially the ones I interviewed. The results revealed that the recipes were passed down by mothers, allowing the children to form a connection with their grandmothers, their aunts, even their neighbors. So that bond with and between the women of Morocco, both past and present. There was a sense of belonging and collective component embodied through Morocco's collective memory of beauty rituals. I'll also just put very quickly this citation. They make time for the hammam. It's really a bond of the women experience. My mother would heat garlic and olive oil and then add lots of oils before applying to my roots. Everyone has their own recipe. It's powerful. And that is Sarah from the first family I've interviewed. And now, my favorite part, food. So nostalgia was particularly evident when it came to tradition and religious ritual around food. So there was this weekly tradition of eating couscous on Fridays after prayer. So the parents, Abdel, which was the dad of the first family home, mentions that the tradition takes him back to his childhood, as his parents and grandparents had the same tradition. And everyone in Morocco as well on Fridays usually eats couscous after the prayer. So we can see here a sense of nostalgia. There's also the daily tradition of having Moroccan mint tea. So the parents recall memories that they share in the stories. The children also, Aya from the second family says that a lot of the stories and history of Morocco that her dad passed down to her was over a cup of tea. So those shared moments. And that helped also having a better understanding of his childhood, his travels, immigration journey of her dad to Canada. It was also very interesting is that there's a lot of memories which help children to imagine these celebrations. For example, a reminder of the smells during the Friday couscous, a reminder of minty. So those things that activate imagination and help children to project in those memories as well. So there was also family stories. It was fascinating to see how much nostalgia and imagination was inhabited through the stories the parents shared with their children. These stories are often family memories that help the children make sense of their origins, but also imagine the daily lives of their parents and grandparents in Morocco. Today I chose 2 examples. So this one here, which talks more about imagination and projecting through the desert with all this idea of jinns and stories, folklore stories. And then I also have this one, which explains the name of the grandmother of one of the participants, which explains that during the French colonization, her dad, her mom used to have this rifle called El Tunsia, and that was used to name the daughter, so as a sense of freedom, liberation from the French as well. Another interesting part was through music and dance. So nostalgia being transmitted and shared with the children via traditional instruments. So al-oud, the parents played during their childhood in Morocco and here in Quebec, the instruments. There were different cassettes from Amisola bands, Arabic music, and learning how to dance and follow the rhythms. It was also mentioned that traditional war music and dances that have been and are very much alive in Morocco today were passed down. So just to give you an idea, Regada, Gnawa, Fantasia, and Rai. Those express a collective memory and a shared history and representation of the Moroccan territory. So the transmission helps, it helps keep the history alive as well. And now, there were these moments that I decided to name unspoken nostalgia, moments that were speaking through me by symbolism. When I was conducting one of my group interviews, I visited the home of the second family, and there I found the unspoken nostalgia. A handmade Moroccan teapot meant to serve us mint tea, foaming of the tea to ensure it was rightly so prepared, Moroccan ceramic plates filled with traditional cakes, small Moroccan crystal glasses to drink our tea, tea cloths with traditional patterns. It was like I was visiting my own home, visiting my parents. And suddenly, it became clear to me. Meticulously collected, these items represented displaced lives, families, cultures, languages, and stories. They were a vital part of their individual and collective histories, memories that were sometimes left behind and sometimes very carefully packed in their suitcases as a reminder of the country they were leaving behind. So to finish today's presentation, I will speak to you about a subject that I usually avoid myself. I am very grateful for the life I have here, and I'm very privileged. But the reality is, most of us, children of immigration, don't make the choice to leave our land. But if we are lucky enough, we remain connected to it through our parents. Indeed, stories of our homeland are embedded in the lives of, again, our homes, our parents, our grandparents, and our ancestors. So when I look at these pictures of my grandmothers, I feel myself drifting between the present and the past. My grandparents' country will not be forgotten. These stories of these beautiful women will not be forgotten, and for they live on with me and will continue to do so long after I'm gone. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you for those incredibly provocative questions about nostalgia and for those sensory tactile descriptions. I do not thank you for making me hungry for couscous. But thank you for those questions, and I'm excited to see what answers you uncover during your PhD and to continue learning from you. I'm now happy to invite Kenza to come up and present. They are also a student at UQAM, and I'm not pronouncing UQAM because I'm from Alberta and I speak French like an Albertan. So.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Mouna, for the presentation. I am too from l'UQAM, Université du Québec à Montréal. So my presentation will be in English, but I wrote my thesis in French. So I'm going to do my best to make it understandable. But yeah. So what I'm presenting today is part of my master's thesis in communication that I finished now. But so I explored how filmmakers from the Palestinian diaspora narrate their family stories using home movies, which we're going to dive into after. What are home movies? So what I was trying to understand was really how these images are reused and what they produce in terms of intimacy, emotion, and embodied experience of a silent and fragmentary memory. So I am interested in how really these filmmakers write and rewrite their intimate stories that are often marked by exile, displacement, and more importantly, the uprooting of a lineage. So nostalgia here is an attraction to the past that kind of becomes a creative force in the rewriting of intimate narratives. So I see my research as almost, I love the word archaeology and excavation. So I see it kind of like an archaeological exploration of different layers of memory that make up the creative processes of both the filmmakers that I study. So the idea is really to explore, investigate more in depth, and analyze the processes guiding their approaches. So the two works I chose to study in this thesis are by Tiberias, that you might have heard of, by Lina Swalem, and In the Jasmine Vines by Nadal Omari. So the question that I attempted to answer, and I attempted to translate in here, is very long, but it's how do filmmakers reuse Palestinian family archives through their diasporic subjectivity to create sensitive spaces where both intimate and collective memories are revealed? And how do the creative processes of Lina Swalem and Nadal Omari inform us about this sensitive treatment of home movies? So quickly, concerning my methodology, I focused mainly on the films themselves and on the filmmakers' own words, which was really important for me to hear what those two filmmakers had to say about their movies and their creative processes. So I combined film analysis, an interview I conducted with Nadal Omari, and media content analysis, such as podcasts featuring Lina Swalem. I first wanted to also speak to Lina, but she wasn't available due to many reasons. But that's why I chose the podcast form to have her voice in my work too. So today I will not be able to cover all my thesis, but I will try to give you an overview of my theoretical framework and also some key findings that I have. So quickly, I will start by presenting the two movies. So Bye Bye Tiberias, Bye Bye Tiberiade in French, is a movie made by Lina Swalem, who is a French filmmaker of Palestinian and Algerian origin. And she tells the story of her mother, Hiam Abbas, and her exile from her native Palestinian village named Der Hanna. So she brings back her mom to her native village, and she films this journey, and the images of this trip are intertwined with older home movies filmed by Lina's dad in the 90s on her first trip to Palestine after she was born. And so she tries to piece together these kind of like scattered memories and understand her family stories. And she has one starting point, which is the Nakba of 1948. The Nakba quickly, or the catastrophe in Arabic, refers to the forced exile of the Palestinian people from their land. And the first one took place in 1948. And so the second movie, In the Jasmine Vines, is a medium-length film. It is 31 minutes long, much shorter than the first one. It's made by the Canadian filmmaker of Palestinian and Egyptian origin. So she creates kind of like a more poetic and non-linear film, which is in between a collage, plastic art, and a documentary. And in this, there's like a lot of home movies filmed by her grandfather, Fawzi Ramari, and she constructs her journey through the memories of the Palestinian land that she recalls through 5 elements, so the sea, the city, the mountains, embroidery as a craft, and the desert. So what are home movies, quickly? To begin with, it's really relevant to define those. I use the definition by Roger Audin that I translated here. So he says that home movies are usually a film or video made by a member of a family about characters, events, or objects linked to, in some way, to the history of that family and intended primarily for use by members of that family. So they're often fragments. They're non-linear, they're incomplete. Like we saw in the video before, we don't really know what's happening, but we get the feeling of it and the nostalgia that comes with it. So this already tells us something about the creative processes of those two filmmakers. They work with fragments. They gather pictures, videos, text, voices, music, and they really like cling to every crap of the past to read, but also to rewrite their family histories. And we're going to see later how this rewriting part comes to be. So for example, in Bye Bye Tiberias, the material is multiple. We have like black and white pictures. We have, like I said, the home movies shot by Lina's father in the 90s. We have historical archives of Palestine. And we also have a text written by Lina that she makes her mom read in front of the camera. And In the Jasmine Vines is also more of a collage type of movie. She uses home movies filmed by her grandfather, text, sketches, and music to construct really like the full sensory experience of Palestinian land, at least what she remembers of it. So this process of compilation is really important here because it's not how movies are of interest. Here it's how they are rearranged, how they are re-edited to build a new form. So that's why my work is anchored in secondhand cinema or reuse cinema, as theorized by Christa Blumlinger. She argues that it's not simply a copy of these images, but it's really a way of perceiving memory that makes the past images readable with the knowledge we have in the present. So, for example, in Bye Bye Tiberias, you have like the physical representation of a collage with the photos hung on the wall. And it also evokes kind of like the work of memory itself, which starts with like the recognition of the gaps in remembrance and unfolds eventually as a reconstruction of the past, kind of like an investigation to find answers from people that are often no longer here to give them. So in a podcast, Swalem says that it was about putting the pieces back together, recreating connections, bringing buried memories to the surface, and trying to restore a sense of linearity to completely fragmented stories. She likes to use the idea of puzzle to define her practice. So we know by now that it was never about leaving the archive and the home movies as there was, but it was about rewriting a new narrative from these images. So I like to see it as if they were like stitching together a bunch of fragments to make them become understandable and readable in the present. So I noticed that the starting points of both filmmakers is precisely the gaps that are contained in their archive itself. Home movies try to preserve a moment that is absent in the present. And Raymond Belour talks about it. He says that it's la douleur de l'archive, or the pain of the archive, because it always contains an absence of a certain time. And so Lina explains that her father filmed their trip to Palestine in the 90s almost as if he feared that everything might disappear. So she raises here an important tension underlying the archive, which is the fear of forgetting, that leads to an urge to inscribe the past in the present. She says, I didn't put the quote, but she says, "These images are the treasure of my memory, which I don't want to let slip away. I know that they too are in danger of falling into oblivion." And she stresses that by stating that when you film in Palestine, you are already filming an archive, even in the present, because you do not know what will remain the next day. So this feel of oblivion comes with an urgent need to document a reality that is threatened by disappearance, threatened to be silenced or erased. So it is even more relevant when we talk about the Palestinian land. And Nada also evokes during our interview that there is a strong need to document within the diaspora. She says there is like really this urge to always, and also this obsession with documentation, to like make it a proof of existence in a way. So she reminds us that the archive can be destroyed, stolen, or lost, and also for her, the archives is therefore a form of resistance. She says it's the way we take our place wherever we are. So the use of we here reveals really the shift from the intimate to the collective, from the family to a people, and makes the home movies and their reuse proof of the existence of collective that goes beyond the simple intimacy of a family. So by engaging with nostalgia for a repressed past, there is not only an urgency for filmmakers to inscribe the past in the present, but also to inscribe a narrative that has been erased and silenced and that is threatened to be erased or silenced. And so this relationship with the archive as a place of resistance to erasure is linked, as Nada and Linda pointed out, to the very positioning of the two filmmakers. It is not insignificant that I talked about diaspora, because their position as a member of the Palestinian diaspora really influences the way they make movies. And so Laura Marx talks about intercultural cinema, which is really the cinema made by filmmakers from the global South diaspora in the West. And she says that this intersection of different cultural regimes of knowledge makes their position really like liminal and really productive in a way, because this intersection that she describes as a hybridity allows access to knowledge that falls outside dominant Western narratives, which enables new knowledge to be created. New knowledge, at least for the West, but new knowledge. So faced with absences and silences, according to Marx, the creative processes of those two filmmakers consist in part of digging up, she also talks about excavation, a narrative hidden between images and words. There is really this idea of layers of memory to allow buried fragments of intimate memory to be exhumed. So the film do not start from a complete story, but from something missing, again, gaps. And so I argue that these gaps reflect the filmmaker's own lived experience of exile, understood as a rupture from the land, a rupture from a temporal continuity, and a rupture from the collective and family history. So in this case, family intimacy that carries the story of exile becomes the true starting points of the creative process, both by Tiberias and in the Jasmine Vines, open with home movies. And through these archives, the land appears not just as a territory, but also as a place of belonging and origin. It is distant, but it is still here through the sensorial experience they make of it. So the metaphor of uprooting helps us understand this. One of the first VHS that we see by Tiberias is Lina climbing on a tree when she was a kid, and in the voiceover she talks about her mother's exile, and I found that very interesting how like the rooted tree contrasts with her own condition of displacement and uprooting. And so both filmmakers, in my opinion, as descendants of uprooted ancestors, offer sensory experiences of mourning a land and also mourning a lineage, and because grief is also the loss of a land. And so this morning, yes, appears through wandering that is omnipresent both in their processes and in the movies themselves. Swalem describes the exile as a long drift, a life in between spaces where home can never be fully recovered. So this drift is also, like I said, visible in the form of the films. The narrative is not linear, it hesitates, it searches. And one might expect clear stories when dealing with family memory, but instead there is often an emptiness at first. But this narrative emptiness is also linked with an emotional fullness in a way, because they experience grief in their movies which makes it like even more interesting because it's often haptic in the way that their images they show are like really sensorial, and so they really do not deal with that mourning, but they experience it through the film. So, for example, Nada Al-Amari in The Jasmine Vines uses the voice of her grandfather to establish his presence, so as to like show this mourning because she lost him, and also losing a grandfather in this context, also losing the land because it's our connection to the land. So, yeah, this was a quick way to sum it up. I don't think I have much time left, but yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. It's lovely that we got to start with that interlude of the research creation from Elliot of home movies, and then learn more from you about all the academic theory around home movies. It's almost like we planned this. But thank you for that really wonderfully rich in theory, multimodal methodology. It's lovely to move from the oral histories onto that memory and nostalgia mediated through memory. So thank you for that. I'm happy to now pass it off to our third and final presenter for this panel. I have the name here. It is Alice. We have Alice coming into us from UBC. Whenever you're ready, Alice.
I'm going to share my screen and pray that everything works out. But hi, everyone. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Alice. I'm currently finishing up my MA at UBC in English Literature, and I'm, thank you for the Nostagain team for hosting and for inviting me. I'm super grateful today to be able to present on some ideas that emerge out of my thesis research on contemporary Asian feminist art and poetry. And so these are just some ideas I've been playing with. And so as always, I'd be very grateful for any comments, questions, and directions for future research. And let me just start my timer so I'm not going over. But yeah, so my presentation is titled The Nostalgia, Escape, and Empire in Chia Amisola's A Bedroom in Las Piñas. New York-based programmer, poet, and internet artist Chia Amisola's browser game, A Bedroom in Las Piñas, opens in part with an epithet from Louise Gluck's poem Nostos. On a black screen, Gluck's words, "We look at the world once in childhood, the rest is memory," emerge and fade to an introduction of the game's premise. You find yourself in a bedroom again. Is it possible to trace your smallness? Age 5. Thus begins Amisola's first-person narrative browser game, composed of a series of 11, what Amisola terms vignettes, selfhoods, and memories from Manila unfolded over years, landscapes, and ways of seeing. Accessed entirely through verb-object interactions. And set in an early 2000s bedroom, Amisola described the bedroom in Las Piñas as an ode to early escape room games, which are a subgenre of adventure games that emerged and gained popularity in the late 20th century. Yet, unlike the expansive open world characteristic of more like traditional adventure video games, the escape room subgenre tends to kind of prioritize closed or constricted spaces that lend a greater sense of immediacy to player progress, which is kind of generally achieved through finding nested or hidden worlds and solving puzzles to advance to the next stage or chapter. And so, in addition to the game's generic retro inspiration, A Bedroom in Las Piñas is also very much inspired by Jake Elliott's point-and-click narrative flash game, A House in California, which was first released in 2010. So I'm going to skip past these. I'll come back to that, but which was first released in 2010. So Jake Elliott's game follows a young boy's kind of exploration of his home in suburban Lodi, California. And the game itself is also reminiscent of even earlier text-based games that emerged with the rise of like personal computers and the internet. And so the game's mechanisms are actually quite straightforward. The player's exploration of and movement in the world are limited to an evolving tray of possible actions, such as look, enter, and play, but also more speculative action options, such as remember or forget, that when applied to interactable objects like flocks of birds, computers, etc., unlocks lines of dialogue or prose that really like flesh out the game's world, like dreamy childhood world. And so similarly, A Bedroom in Las Piñas follows an unnamed protagonist's coming of age and eventual transnational move from the Philippines to the United States as she kind of sifts through, recalls formative memories from ages of between 5 to 18. And progress in the game, or quote unquote, like becoming, as Amisola calls it, is kind of very much tracked through the player's progression, completion of task-based puzzles, and navigation of the playable character's memories. Where was that? Okay. Okay. Where am I? I lost my train of thought. No. There we go. Largely comprises scenes of crumbling infrastructures, hospital shelters, television broadcasts, scripted game shows, car rides, and computer file confessions. So here, in contrast to kind of Eliot's nostalgic tour down memory lane of a dreamy American suburbia, the escape game's genre's dramatic setting, the escape game genre's dramatic settings, or the adventure game's fantastic open worlds, the unglamorous, kind of more prosaic vignettes in A Bedroom in Las Piñas depict moments from the everyday lives of subjects, quote, not folded into the prosperity of global capitalism, that are, if not melancholic, then at the very least, like tempered. And so recurring references to, for example, clock time as a main mechanic, exhaustion, and the saturation of information communication technologies throughout the game reveals how the protagonist's youth is mediated by a particular global shift to postmodernity, as in like late capitalism, which is marked by, quote, greatly intensified rates of commercial, technological, and organizational innovation, and the production of fragmentation, insecurity, ephemeral, and even development within a highly unified global space economy of capital flows. I'm putting David Harvey here. And so the game's early 2000s world, aesthetic and cultural references, really, I see it as serving as helpful entry points into the fragments of what Amisola calls almost memories from 18 years of youth, identity, selfhood, and objecthood in Manila. Let's go back to... Okay. So it becomes quite apparent over the course of the game that this kind of like becoming is very much tethered to a particularly like race and gendered subject formation, which is inevitably mediated by the kind of structuring mechanisms of enduring legacies of US imperialism and Cold War logics. And in an interview with Meg Miller, Amisola states that their artistic practice is specifically invested in a third world internet, which they define as an internet of exploitation, colonialism, and resistance that has been weaponized against the third world's gendered labor that services call centers, sex work, and data labeling industries. So much of this is very much tied to the Philippines' long history as a US colony, which may be traced back to the workings of capitalist transformation during the late 1800s in the era of imperialism and the United States' subsequent colonial project with the Philippines as its kind of like first experiment in colony building in the 20th century, which again, like then informs the nation's position as a global leader in business process outsourcing. And I have like a lot more research on this, but I feel like for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of skip past that. But as we'll kind of see with the game, it is very much like these conditions that inform and construct the playable character's memory worlds. Okay. So to that effect, my paper is very much interested in looking at how the game's retro medium and memory-based narrative might open ways to critique the conditions, what Amisola describes as the conditions that we are entrenched in, but while also gesturing to the potential of digital mediums for fashioning alternative modes of intimacy, relationality, and resistance within a world that keeps spinning the game subject out, which is a line of dialogue from midpoint in the game. So I've kind of played a few clips of the game over the course of my introduction to really kind of foreground the kind of vibe that Amisola's browser game is kind of working towards. And so with thinking with Traffickle here, I did want to note that like video games are, or at least have the capacity to be powerful sites of political engagement and critique, as they tend to like render visually and conceptually accessible the logics that make up a worldview, which in turn kind of reveal how political structures operate, or how they fail to operate, or how they could or should operate. So a critical reading of the infrastructure of gaming might then productively elucidate the ways in which existing world systems come to naturalize economic and other structural inequalities by making them appear fair, and reveal the racial logic that undergirds the spatialized systems of oppression and exploitation of the world as a kind of game space. So in particular, the game's retro aesthetics, which are quite like, to me, reminiscent of 21st century trends that kind of traffic largely in a melancholic restored nostalgia, such as vaporwave or maybe cybercore, webcore, offers an interesting entry point into the kind of like ways in which Amisola is constructing memory and drawing in memory spaces to draw into relief the material disparities of this like global digital divide. So the graphics are very much like desaturated and rendered in bright deathless colors, pixelated, collaged, where like to create these scenes of like sparsely furnished rooms and liminal landscapes. And so while like the style of the game cannot necessarily be constrained to like a singular identifiable aesthetic, it does seem to very much combine a variety of like late 2000s and early 2010s internet trends, visually and textually reliant on a 20th century vision of the future of like from the like 80s and 90s. And so in particular, the stylistic markers of maybe like vaporwave specifically, which was popularized in the early 2010s and most commonly visually characterized by neon colors, glitch art, and 8-bit melancholic, quote, images of cityscapes, beaches, and other quasi-utopian aesthetic elsewhere stand out in the game. And so if for Alec and Koch, vaporwave presupposes a white Western audience and that it traffics mainly in a nostalgia for a modernist sense of historicity, and for the period of classical capitalism before the dissolution of the centered modernist subject, that Amisola's evocation of a sense of nostalgic melancholia through the aesthetic genre highlights the alienating hypersaturation of late capitalism in the game. However, instead of yearning for a return to an idealized time that precedes the trauma that followed postmodernity's final fracture from history through digital technology, the game's retro references map the temporal and spatial shift from classical to late capitalism through vignettes of precarious life in the Philippines, where for the game's protagonist, modern subjecthood and nostalgic desires for an idealized elsewhere were never quite available in the first place. And so turning to think about nostalgia in conversation with like collective action and memory, as I mentioned earlier, the game's premise is like quite simple. Essentially, players can only escape the game through unlocking and solving puzzles, which are framed as fragments of memories from the playable character's life growing up in Manila. So unlike Elliot's Flash game, A Bedroom in Las Piñas is like the player navigates the world from a first-person perspective. We don't really like follow a third-person playable character. And so in turn, it kind of like stages the player as the game's protagonist in many ways. And so while like certain moments define the protagonist more clearly as a feminine Filipino subject, like the formal and narrative distinction between the player and the game's protagonist is like quite blurred. As is quite blurred. Okay, I'm going to skip a bit because I'm realizing I'm kind of running behind. So at one point in the game, the player is invited to kind of click through the scene where there's we first see a pair of hands of neon pink upturned palms, while a later scene depicts like these like electric blue facing palms. And as the player clicks through the available tray of verbs, the graphics alternate to mimic the actions of inspecting your hands. Where like the action verb watch is applied to the hands titled yourself. And so lines such as you are beginning to understand that identity is a construction, that narrative is written, that your story is isomorphic to history are also kind of applied to the player. And in turn implicates the players in the game's subject's becoming. And in this instance, the player/protagonist is then reminded that they didn't already know of the already historically constituted conditions of their body. And so as we progress in the game, we also explore scenes that begin to construct, formally and narratively, a collective desire for more speculative or capacious minoritarian life worlds. In a black and white vignette composed of pixelated twinkling stars, the player clicks to wish on a shooting star to unlock the line for the dissolution of the colonial state. There we go. For an identifiable identity for a name I couldn't make mine. Here, the player is invoked to wish alongside the main character for the dissolution of the colonial state. That is presumably the Philippines, though the statement can definitely be read as quite like intentionally broad. And so the fictional protagonist's dreams, aspirations, and desires for a world outside the ongoing systems of oppression are staged as our own as we become increasingly enmeshed in her world. And then, so in a vignette from age 17, you know what, I might skip these parts, but I'm so sad that I'm skipping these parts. But essentially, like, we are asked to remember the radio, and then the radio brings us to these kind of like collective and inherited memories of both Filipino history, that kind of flesh out the protagonist's experience of her world. That's a TLDR. But essentially, economic, spatial, and racial inequalities, war and violence are drawn together, remember, through the radio, which, alongside the game's recurring references to the growing saturation of technology in everyday contemporary life, kind of very much refracts the dizzying postmodern experience of global events across space and time. And okay, I'm really trying to pay attention to not go over, but by blending the game's predefined character with a more capacious and defined playable character, a bedroom in Las Piñas we might see as formally closing the perspectival distance to create a greater sense of empathy and immersion. So the game's mapping out and demonstration of how the conditions we are entrenched in then kind of suggests that it should be a collective concern where the digital form of the game and the erosion of the player/protagonist divide enable the game's genre and mechanisms enabled by the game's genres and mechanisms underscore Amisola's endeavors to retool digital technologies, quote, for collective resistance. So I think there's some parts where I talk about this one scene where it's like this scene where they're like kind of split between a game show, a Wheel of Fortune, and essentially what I was trying to get at here, and a club dance scene. But essentially what I was trying to get at here is that the scene of gambling and of aleatory gambling for a chance to like win some sort of like for the slim chance of winning a prize actually unlocks this actual real event where which called at the Philippine Sports Stampede, where 73 people died after a crowd of 30,000 people gathered outside a stadium for the slim chance of winning monetary prizes surged towards the gates. And so it actually is, so basically clicking through these speculative memories actually unlocks real lived experiences and real lived memories of for this. Yeah, okay, I'll pause here because I'm realizing I'm going way over, and I'm so sad that I feel like there's a lot more I wanted to get into, but I hope that this was a productive introduction to Amisola's browser-based game, which is free to play. I think if you just search up Amisola Bedroom in Las Piñas on your browser, you'll be able to access it, and you'll be able to click through the game for yourself and to really explore it. But essentially, I just really want to think about escape, memory, and nostalgia, and how maybe like video games can kind of begin, or the experience of playing a game can begin to allow us to explore memories that are maybe not our own, but that are both real, speculative, recalled, and kind of remembered in different ways. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. You can contact me here. My works site is available upon request. There's a lot more that I wanted to say, but that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much for your virtual presence. Where's my camera? Thank you for being here virtually. I want to remind everyone that these conversations don't end right here, right? For the people who are here virtually, you can follow up with them on email, reach out to them, tell them how much you loved what they said, would like to know more about what they said. And I want to thank Alice in particular for raising more questions around capitalism and these questions of audience. And that's such a good perspective to add into these questions we're grappling with for nostalgia, displacement in media. But I'm going to turn it over to our question period. I see we have a question right there.
Perfect. We do have some questions. Just a heads up, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions at this point. So I'm just going to run this microphone over to our first question.
Hello. Thank you so much for all your work. I wanted to know from particularly Mouna and Richy, how is working or researching, retelling, and showcasing such intimate work, such personal work, how do you choose opacity? How do you work with opacity of what to reveal to us as an audience because of context and all of that, and what to keep and allow to exist without us knowing?
Hello. Okay, you can. Thank you so much for your question. And I love that you're talking about opacity because it's a conversation we literally had yesterday with Kenza. I think sharing your memories, sharing your past, sharing those stories is a very intimate, it's a very intimate space that you create. I think I was lucky enough because I am of Moroccan descent. Well, I was born there, but I grew up here. And I think that really helped me form a certain connections to the Moroccans I wanted to interview. But I was very transparent of the process. I was transparent that it would mean sharing some of their tales, some of their stories. The names you see actually are not their real names. So everything has been done, I'm gonna say it in French, anonymement. Yes, thank you very much. The English is leaving my body right now. But this process was very respectful of their identity, and they chose to share a lot of things with me. What you saw was actually just the first layer. I have 100 pages of results, but I think through my process, I wanted to respect them, respect their knowledge, their experience, and I think that's kind of the beauty in working with people who you are comfortable with as well, is you understand what you can share and what you cannot share. So I will be lying if I said that a lot of the results that they shared with me, I did not put in my thesis, and that was a choice out of respect for them. And I think opacity is also in asking for permission. And the pictures I used at the end were with me and my grandmothers. One of them has passed away, unfortunately, but this morning I called my parents and I was like, do you think I can have permission to use that? Because as much as I am there, this is them, this is their life. So the person closer to them are my parents. So do you please give me permission to use that? And I think opacity is through the process and how you choose to connect to the people and the work. Hopefully that answered your question, Leah.
I will add quickly that we were talking about this like yesterday, and we also came to the conclusion that often intimacy is curated. So you choose what you want to show, and also for like when you reuse home movies, like the two filmmakers I studied, they didn't use any home movie. They used the home movies that they were that felt right for them. And they also asked for permission, and that was like a big deal also when I talked to Nada, because she told me that she didn't want to use her grandfather's voice in her work because her dad and her aunt told her that it didn't sound like him. So she ended up like superimposing his voice 13 times to make it like into this diffuse presence without having his clear voice on the tape. So yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap it there because of time. So I want to thank you for such a good question and thank our presenters for their talks today. And now we have what we have all been waiting for, the very cool research creation things around the back. Please explore, please get coffee, and have some more conversations. Thank you.
Thank you once again to our presenters for that wonderful presentation. They were wonderful, fantastic, and thank you so much to the audience members. If you have some questions, please feel free to still ask our presenters. If you have some questions, you can pop them into the chat. We're leaving that Zoom open, and we'll go ahead and find a way to get that to them. We're going to go ahead, close up this section of the live stream, but we're going to leave the Zoom open and continue into the next part, which is the Research Creation Expo. So if you're here in person, please take a walk around, grab some coffee, and for those of you on Zoom, stick around. We're going to have a live version for you. Have a good one.